Janus, who has two faces. One looks one direction and the other looks into the other direction, and is said to symbolize transitions and changes. Usually the carvings were placed on doorways and in corridors where people were going like from a transition to the outside world into the inside world. But it also represents that transition from the old to the new that we generally think about as New Year, or maybe just the transitions that we have to do every day as we let go of the past and move into the future. So one of the things we do in the ceremony for this service is we have some paper, and you can write down on that piece of paper the things that you would like to release from the last year, all the things that you would like to, bad habits, grief, anger, that kind of thing, that you would like to let go of coming into the new year. And we'll hold intentions in our mind for what we would like to do for the new year. So I've got a basket full of pencils here, and I've got these new paper. I've never tried this before. Sometimes in the past we've done a burning ceremony. Today we've got a dissolving ceremony. We've got this water-soluble paper. So I'm going to pass these out, and you can be, as I'm speaking and giving my little topic here that I'm going to give, you can be writing down on these pieces of paper the things that you want to release. And then when I finish speaking, we'll have a little bit of music, and you can come up and dissolve this paper in these bowls of water that I have up at the front here, so that we can let those things go, so that we can move into the new year having, cleansed ourselves a little from those old expectations. So. Okay, thank you, Suzanne, for that. So 2024 as a year, I don't know, it makes me cringe a little to think about the things that, we're going to be looking back on today, and the things that have happened. Of course, the election was very prominent in the past year. Joe Biden stepping down as the Democratic candidate, and Kamala Harris being chosen as the new candidate. And of course, ultimately, the re-election of Donald Trump, which, some people find somewhat disturbing going into the future. And also we had the hurricane in North Carolina that caused so much devastation in the mountains, so much loss of life and loss of people's homes and property. And I was just noting, I had to contact my insurance agent earlier on this year to make some changes, and he told me that my insurance company is no longer offering property insurance anywhere nationwide in the coming year. I'm guessing the hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires and whatever, it's kind of exhausted their reserves in terms of what they have for their underwriters, and they're not going to be offering that anymore. So, we can look forward to some, more difficulty perhaps in the coming years of obtaining reasonably priced property insurance, which is so important, in the days to come. The other thing, of course, on a personal note, my wife was killed in a car accident in November, and, I'm moving forward into the new year with a different focus on my life. I was planning to retire, and now I'm planning to go back to work in 2024 to have some kind of structure, around which I can build my day-to-day life. So big changes for me as well. I'm sure you guys have got things just as momentous going on in your lives nowadays. So these are the kinds of things personally that we look at in the new year as we're making this transition from the past to the future. But I want to also talk a little more generally about our relationship to the past, the present, and the future, and what those ideas really mean. Now, image of Janus, these two faces, one of them looking one way and one of them looking the other, and the fact that it's sort of going through doors or in corridors is where it's normally placed. It gives the impression kind of that the past and the future are like places that, you know, we can walk to or go to. We can walk backwards into the past or walk forwards into the future. But it's not really like that, is it? It's like the past doesn't appear to be a place that we can go back to, unless you believe the science fiction writers who say, you know, we might one day create a time machine where we can go back into the past and change things. We only seem to be able to, you know, apparently move towards the future. And even the future does not appear to be a place that exists as a firmly decided thing already. I mean, the future, if it's defined by anything, is defined by the fact that it's not yet determined, that it's full of possibilities that are yet to be realized, that it could go in any direction, and we don't know what our life's going to look like in the future. So it's not like we imagine, you know, time is not like we imagine, like a corridor that we walk along, because we can't go back and we can't actually see what is in the front of us. In the spiritual traditions where they emphasize being in the now, they often say that in actual fact the current moment is the only real moment that exists, but it's eternal. There's the eternal now. And in this way of looking at things, the past is not like a place that we're traveling from. It only exists in our memory as information. And the future only exists in our imagination. We can kind of, we look at the past, we try to formulate a kind of model of the world and the way it works, and then we run these simulations against that model, trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. So, you know, we can make it turn out, hopefully, you know, the way that we want it to turn out. So where does that leave us in terms of like how we lead our lives? We know that it's so important that we have these faculties of memory that allows us to function in the world. You know, without our memories, there's so many things we wouldn't be able to do. Learn new information that we can put into practice in the future. Get from A to B through remembering how we got there last time. Remember the names of our friends and family and their faces so that we can recognize them. I mean, there's apparently, according to the internet, there's 16 different types of memory that we have and that we use to function in our everyday life. But the one that we tend to obsess about the most, I guess I would say, is what they call episodic memory. So episodic memory is that ability to remember events in the past, the things that happened, and then to be able to replay them as if they're kind of happening now in the current moment. So we say, we remember a wonderful vacation that we had years ago, and we play it back in our memory. We can remember like lying on the beach, the feel of the sun on our skin and the wind blowing in our hair, the smell of the suntan lotion, the taste of the beer that we were having at the time, all that good stuff. Or we can maybe remember a less pleasant memory. We may be forced through our trauma that we have experienced to replay that memory of the trauma that we had over and over again in our minds, reliving the negative emotions that brought up for us until we feel, you know, that we're going to go crazy with having to relive that unpleasant memory over and over again. So it can be either a wonderful thing that we can use to entertain ourselves in a quiet moment by reliving a pleasant memory, or it can be something that tyrannizes us as we feel trapped in the past by something that happened previously. So one of the things that happens when an unpleasant thing happens, and we have it in our memory here, is our mind is like, I don't want to experience that unpleasant thing again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replay it in my simulation well, I'm going to run through it again. I'm going to try and find ways in which I could have avoided that happening in the past, so that if the same situation comes up in the future, I can avoid that happening again. So, you know, our mind is trying to learn something from that past memory, something that we can apply to the future that's going to help us in the future, which of course is a very useful thing, and it often works out that way, that, you know, we can learn important lessons from examining our memories and going back into the past and either writing about those episodes or replaying them in our mind so that we can learn the lesson that needs to be learned from them. But it seems that what sometimes happens is we kind of get stuck, sort of replaying that memory but not able to learn the lesson from it, so that it keeps repeating over and over again and kind of causes that stress for us. I know as somebody who suffers from addiction and is in recovery, one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to mine the details of our past to try to learn about ourselves and the way that we respond to the things that happened to us in the past, and learn the lessons that are to be learned from those responses, and try and improve the way that we do things, you know, in the future. An important part of that learning process is having a good model in our imaginations of how the world works. If we have a bad model of how the world works, we might make the same mistake over and over again, because, you know, we're basing our actions and our predictions about the future on a flawed model of how other people react to us, how the world works, you know, things that we were taught in our childhood due to dysfunctional relationships with caregivers. So we can have that model that does not quite mesh with reality, so that when we replay our memories and try to use the model of reality to predict what we might do better in the future, it doesn't quite work out the way we expect, you know, because our model is not quite in line with reality. So there's something else that is a little bit of a problem to us when we're trying to predict the future as well, which is that the future is inherently unpredictable. I think you'll find physicists will tell us that there's quite a good degree of randomness involved in the universe that we live in, and that there's many things that until an event takes place, a situation is kind of resolved into the macroscopic level, that those facts about the situation are actually not determined yet. They're in a state in which we couldn't predict whether they go one way or the other. So if the universe itself is inherently not determined until an event takes place in the future, our ability to predict what's going to happen and guarantee that the outcome we think we can make through our planning occurs is also a flawed idea. Now, we don't know what the future is going to bring. So if you've ever had one of those conversations where you think, oh, I'm going to go and see my boss next Tuesday, and I'm going to ask for a raise, and I'm going to say this, and they're going to say that, and when he says that, I'm going to say this, and, you know, we rehearse out the entire conversation ahead of time, and then we like take, you know, oh, well, maybe that's not the way it's going to go, maybe there's a different way the conversations go. I'm going to say that, and he's going to say something different this time, and I'm going to say this, and can we rehearse out 6 different ways in which the conversation might go, and then when it comes to the day and we sit down in front of them, we're just like, none of those things happened. They say something completely different, and now we're like, oh, all that rehearsal time I put in was wasted, and I may as well just have sat down, said what I was going to say, seen what the other person says, and responded in the moment, and then I could have wasted, you know, I wouldn't have needed to waste all that worry about rehearsing these conversations in my mind. And such a lot of our lives is like that, you know, trying to use our past experience to predict what the future is going to be so we can keep ourselves safe, protect ourselves, prepare for the future, you know, in the best way that we possibly can. And none of that, of course, is a bad thing. You know, none of those things are inherently bad, and that is what the faculties of memory and imagination are there for, you know, to enable us as human beings to live that way in the world. But it's not the only way to be. There are other ways to be other than constantly looking at the past and trying to use it to predict what the future is in order to make things turn out the way that we want to do them. And now I've hinted at that in my conversation thing, We could sit down in the moment and pay attention to what's going on right now and have faith that as events unfold, that we will find a way to respond to those events in the moment that will be skillful and useful and, will not get us into trouble. And that will allow us to free up a little bit of that time and energy from that constant planning and obsessing about how we can control the future, because the future happens as it unfolds, It doesn't happen the way that we plan it in our imagination, unfortunately. I had to face that fact in a very unpleasant way this year, I'd spent a lot of time during the course of my life saving for my retirement and imagining, what it would be like, doing these things that I was going to do with my wife in retirement, and the places we would go and the things that we would do, and that future is no longer a possibility. It's been ruled out by events, and so now, one day at a time, I have to decide, how am I going to get through this day? What do I need to do today to give my life purpose so that I can be reasonably happy and content in the life that is this reality that I find myself in today. So I don't know if any of that is kind of useful to anybody. I don't know if you're like that, or whether you do this thing of trying to use the past to predict the future and then find out, that you're spending a lot of time and effort doing that, and that the outcomes you get are not always what you expected, when it unfolds in real time. Reminds me a little bit of that movie Groundhog Day, which I have to say is one of my favourite movies, right? Isn't that the fantasy that we have, that time is really this thing that we could be like, let's try the same thing over and over and over again until we get it exactly right. And then when we get it exactly right, that is where we want to stop. We'll freeze everything that way and our life will be perfect from this point on. And, that movie is so enjoyable because it kind of plays into that fantasy that we have of being able to perfect our lives by going back and doing the same thing over and over again till we get it exactly right. But, quite often in life, although we do often get second chances, the circumstances have changed, and it's not exactly the same as it was the first time. So we're constantly having to pay attention to the little changing nuances of the way things are around us and responding to them in the moment, rather than thinking, yes, I've got my future figured out. I know what I'm going to do. If I take these steps, I'm going to get exactly this outcome that I want, and that's the way it's going to be. The people who are out there doing that quite often find that they end up somewhat frustrated. The future doesn't turn out what they expected it to be, And then it's like, somebody must have sabotaged me. It's this person's fault. If they hadn't done that, then, I would have got the results that I wanted. And now you have something else to add to your obsession of thinking about how people are getting in your way and frustrating your efforts and ruining your life, and before you know it, your mind is filled with negative thoughts, and there's no possibility then of enjoying the current moment as it unfolds, moment by moment. So I'm going to read a reading before we go on to our little ceremony. If you haven't had a chance to write down your stuff on your piece of paper, take your opportunity to write something down. But of course, Sandra's going to play some music for us, so we'll have plenty of time for you to write things down and then come up and drop your pieces of paper in these bowls of water. And I've never done it before. I haven't even tested one out, so I don't know how it'll work, but we'll see. it fits with my topic, right? We should find out how things are in the moment rather than trying to plan ahead. So that's what I've done today. This reading is called The Way by Edmund Muir. Friend, I have lost the way. The way leads on. Is there another way? The way is one. I must retrace the track. It's lost and gone. Back, I must travel back. None goes there, none. Then I will make here my place. The road runs on. Stand still and set my face. The road leaps on. Stay here, forever stay. None stays here, none. I cannot find the way. The way leads on. Oh, the places I have passed. That journey's done. And what will come at last? The way leads on. Are you ready, Sandra?
Yes.
Sorry, I know you were writing your stuff down. Okay. When you're ready, you may continue writing, and then when you've finished, come up and drop your paper into one of these bowls. Thank you. Does anyone need more time to finish writing or bring up their paper? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Sandra. Lovely. So, I mentioned earlier on that one of the things we do in this church is try to serve the wider community, as well as keeping our own doors open. So that brings me to today's justice and generosity opportunities. So there are boxes at the back. We don't pass a plate anymore here at the church. We have our boxes at the back where you can put in money or checks, or if you are up to the modern date, there are QR codes on the boxes that you can scan in order to get to a place where you can make a contribution. So you can contribute towards the upkeep of the church in those boxes, or you can contribute to our justice and generosity partners. And the partner for this quarter is Awesome Found, and that is an organisation dear to the heart of Morgan Ringlespa, one of our members here, and she recommended Awesome Found as our partner for this quarter. So they do good work. Normally, I would ask people to stand and hold hands for the benediction, but I'll have a longer benediction today, so I'm going to invite you to stay seated as we do our closing today, and maybe close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you, and carry this intention forward into the new year. It's a traditional Buddhist reading, and it's entitled Without Hate. May every creature abound in well-being and peace. May every living being, weak or strong, the long and the small, the short and the medium-sized, the mean and the great. May every living being, seen or unseen, those dwelling far off, those living nearby, those already born, those waiting to be born, may all attain inward peace. Let no one deceive another. Let no one despise another in any situation. Let no one from antipathy or hatred wish evil to anyone at all. Just as a mother with her own life protects her only child from hurt, so within yourself foster a limitless concern for every living creature. Display a heart of boundless love for all the world in all its height and depth and broad extent. Love unrestrained without hate or enmity. Then, as you stand or walk, sit or lie, until overcome by drowsiness, devote your mind entirely to this. It is known as living the life divine. Go in peace. Thank you. Thank you.
you.